Hi, everyone. So tonight I just thought we start talking about vibe coding in C++. And for tonight, I chose kind of the setting that we do an interview session with potential AI assistants. And that's kind of, the setting tonight. And I just, like a lot of other people, I'm curious about what you can do. And so that's my motivation behind this. And basically my question is, can I have a coding assistant? And I'm wondering, like, how far are we with the AI in that aspect, and how does the various other aspects of AI show through? Also, well, actually, I am a bit skeptical regards to AI usability, etc. I know it burns a lot of resources, and it's a bunch of hype startups which get a lot of funding and kind of need to turn this into something. So I wanted to see what the current status is and what to do, and just generally get a feel for the technology. So I'm new to this, and so I thought basically let's try those things which are available to everyone easily on the web. So I generally, I'm not part of the hype. I'm just more here for the vibe. But I have a coding task which I get in a minute to, and which then would be nice to have an assistant for. And so this is a task. It's a simple problem that came to my mind, and it's not in the standard. So I want a function that returns an ISO week number from a date, or more specifically from a time point, okay? Which is in Chrono. So this is a very easy interface, and every AI I talked to got that part right. Yay. And the whole thing is trivial in the interface, but in the implementation, it's a little bit more complex because just of the ISO rules, how the first week works and the last weeks. Some years have 52 weeks and others have 53 weeks. And so generally a week number can be anything between 1 and 53. And that is, I thought, a nice problem to ask to have solved by an AI. It's not in the standard. It's not as trivial as you think it is. You can test it easily. It's clear what it should return. And so it's like one function with a single thing which it's doing. So we get things right here. And that's also kind of maybe a nice interview question if you're doing interviews yourself. And so I thought maybe let's just, see, would AI right now pass this test? And then we could, think about if, should that be a coding assistant, and how would that look like? But first, of course, I only know that this is not in the standard because I did a web search, right? So let's do that. And this is my search, and then you find like the top two links is like the date and time library of CPP reference. Of course, that's useful. And then there's a Stack Overflow on top of this, which answers this question. And there, the best rated answer, the top answer, is this one, which actually has an SQL solution for the problem. And I get through two of the C++ solutions in a second. So if an AI is based on the web, it has plenty of material to learn from. And then there's various things which get pointed out here. It's interesting, good overview on the topic. So basically gives us kind of the stuff which we need to know. Also gives us some dates to test, like 1st January of 2010, 1st January of 2006, and 2005. And that's basically where some of my test data, which you will see later in the talk, is coming from. And then that's what my tests are based on, and some other tests which are dates which are from this year, the 1st January of this year and the last day of the year, 31st December. And so they are basically, someone posted this pseudocode, and that's also very convincing. I'm not sure if that's correct. I still, have the task to kind of, see if one implements those 3 functions, if that function would return the correct thing. And when you are looking for date-related problems for C++, you always find a solution by Howard. Usually you find an answer by Howard. Sometimes you need to scroll a bit. In this time, that's the case. But here's the solution in C++ by Howard Hinnant. And of course, he's then often using his libraries, and only part of those libraries are in the standard. And I do wonder if that's like, coming with 26 or something maybe, or so, can we have that? Can we have that in the standard? But to my knowledge, at the moment, that's not in the standard, and at least the internet doesn't turn it up. And this is just, every now and then I will give you the code a bit bigger that you actually can read the code. And so let's look at what the various assistants have to say about that. So the rules are simple. I have 2 prompts. One with a task, the second one asking if the answer it gave prior to that, which hopefully is code, is if that's correct. And that's it. The generated code has to pass my own tests. I do not deeply analyze the code, right? So we're not doing a code quality review here. We're not debugging it. We're not chatting with or conversing about that code we just got with the agent. I don't have time for that. This is an interview. You give me a solution. I have the tests. I see if it's right or wrong. And then I kind of, get a feeling for what your reaction or what is your vibe in generating C++ at the moment. And this is a prompt. Write a function in C++ that is given a chrono time point and returns the week number of which the time point is in. Okay? And that's precisely the task which every AI gets, and we get a solution for from all of the AIs. So let's have a look. And when I mentioned, like for this edition, I've mostly tested easily as available AI systems on the internet. Okay, so we start with Grok because that's what I have access to at Twitter, and I was like, okay. They also brag about Grok, and Grok is Grok is the greatest on Twitter. So I thought, well, let's see if they or he or she is up to the task. So Grok then gives us the solution. And code like this we will see now again. So every AI now falls back on the ctime functionality and does something with struct GM, sometimes GM time, local time, etc. is used. And we see some calculations regarding days, and then we have the calculation of some int, and this int is returned. And this is a little bit bigger. And yeah, so I'm not going to go through what the AI has output here. Just, stop the stream or stop the video if you want to have a closer look at it. I have the links to the Godbolt and to the Quick Bench, which we tested with, and I'll make those links available to you later. And this is now the full extent of Grok's solution here. And then according to Grok, it tells you what it's doing. All the AIs do that, so that's nice. And explains it, like, how's this working? And now we get to the testing part. This is my testing code, which basically is a function which calls a function and then puts out the test result. So I opted not for using some test framework here or something. It's just the output. And at the beginning, I mistyped 2025, but all the tests I show you, all this is actually based on 2025. And I think the result for last year is not that much different, because last year also started on a Monday, as far as I see. Because there's for 2023, I found the claim that the 31st December of 2023 is a Sunday, and then through the leap year of last year, we probably end up with 2 days being the same weekday and the beginning of a year. At least that's my explanation for that. But anyways, the tests you see here are running for 2025, and we see this is a mixed result. We get some things right and some things wrong, and generally it's all over the place. So let's ask Grok if the implementation is correct. After all, I want an assistant which is knowing what it's doing, so it should explain to me what is going on. And I didn't even mention tests, but Grok provides tests. So these tests are here now, what Grok kind of provides. That's cool. And it explains the test cases. I didn't bother to check that. I have my own test cases, so we'll see. But it then finds an issue and says, well, there's actually an edge case, and I correct that. And now we get the improved implementation. Wow. Again, we see a lot of calculations, a lot of ins, days, weeks being calculated, thrown around. And again, this is a full solution. This is the code which it generates now. Second time, and yay! All tests are passing. Everything is correct. Wonderful. According to Grok. The original implementation was mostly correct, but had a potential weakness in the week 53 edge case handling. The improved version aligns more closely with ISO 8601 by using the January 4th rule and robust calculations. The function is now correct for all standard cases, including regular weeks within a year, edge cases at year boundaries, leap years, years with 52 or 53 weeks. So, wow, right? We're off to a really, really good start. Great. Except, wait a minute. That's a test code. And you can try to find something wrong with it. Maybe there's an error in the code, but I copied that to Compiler Explorer and let it run. And if you compile the code and run the code, it gives a different result. So Grok was very confident, and basically then if you fall for that, you think that basically that code should work. And I was kind of surprised that it didn't. And I first noticed by running my own tests, because that's just, I think, what you should do when you have somebody else write code for you, right? You should make sure that that is tested with things that you came up with, which you checked and you think that should be correct. And again, if you run this, okay. That is even worse than the first solution. And it's all over the place. So it's like it generates 54 as a weak number. And so, yeah, that's now basically where you would start a debugging session and to try to fix the code. But so far, I just, that's not what I'm here for. This is an interview, not a coding session. So it's interesting how Grok is wrong, but this made me curious. And a bit later, I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute, it did run those tests somehow, and it got a different result like me. So I would like to know to be able to explain to you why Grok gets a different result. So I asked it, like, what compiler do you use? And now it admits that it actually didn't physically compile the code, and basically that it runs an internal simulation or what it thinks it should do. Maybe it makes it just up. I don't know how that works. But I find that interesting, and that's also, when you talk to AI and you don't use model context protocol, which might give it the ability to actually compile code, you're talking to a parrot which just tells you what it thinks, or I don't know. It's like we need a word for that, right? It's not thinking what it makes up with it. So at least, we get an overview on available compilers, GCC, Clang, MSVC, and MingW. But anyways, enough time on Twitter. So let's move on to ChatGPT. And here again, I just, went to ChatGPT. I've never been on that website, and used their chatbot, which is freely available. And again, the prompt is the same. Write a function in C++ that is given a chromo time point and returns the week number of which the time point is in. And ChatGPT does that and gives us a very easy function here. It then also explains a little bit about it, but also points out that the solution thinks that the week starts on a Sunday, but the ISO week starts on a Monday, as it should be. So we'll have to tell it that the week is starting on a Monday. Yay. And now we get the solution. This is now the way that ChatGPT thinks this should be solved. And again, it's all over the place, but just consistently failing. We get now 0 as the answer. And I'm not sure if that can be explained by an off by 1 error or something. And anyways, we're not here to debug the code. We're here to see if they're up to the task, if it actually helps to use AI to program with. So maybe we can get a better result. And let's see what it actually does when we ask, is your implementation correct? And again, it agrees with that you're right to question the implementation. And then again, interestingly, we get the correct implementation, which is this one. And unlike Grok, we do not get tests, okay? And I didn't ask for tests, and it's just, I thought that may be something for next edition to see how they generate tests. But in this case, it's just, I have the tests, I don't need to ask for them. So we get lots of comments, and so we kind of know what it's thinking. So if you actually want to understand what it's doing, that's a good thing. Grok also did use comments, but more sparingly. So here's almost every line is explained, and some other lines you just, can see what it's doing. But just for this one line, in day of year, it just says year day +1. Why is it doing that? Just there's no comment on that. So it's not everywhere compiled and commented. And I would find that really useful if, for every line, it gives you reasoning if it's just not an assignment. But if it's an assignment, maybe just explain what that variable is for. And the testing, again, is now coming up with interesting numbers. The last day of the year is in the week number 5, twice. That's not what I was looking for. So we get mixed results. ChatGPT will be, for now, I think, what we've seen. But what about Claude? I tried to get to sign up to Claude, but they wanted my number, my telephone number, and yeah, I thought, well, I know someone who is actually using Claude and posting about that, and I thought maybe do a collaboration with Matt Godbolt. So thank you, Matt, for helping out here and being part of this. It was really interesting to chat about this with you and hear your experiences. And so since Claude is behind login and a verification, and I've asked Matt to help out, and he did. So thank you. And so let's see what Claude has to say about this. And there's multiple versions where Matt has access to, and I said, well, we use the chatbot version for the other tests, so let's go for the chatbot version here too. And also, like, other versions, like we're going to talk about that later, like Claude Code. Same prompt again. Write a function in C++ that is given a chrono time point and returns the week number of which the time point is in. And this is the first try of Claude. The first time I actually see an output of an AI using a template. So the clock is a template parameter here, which sometimes makes it a bit cumbersome to use this function, in my opinion. The other used system time, which I'm fine with. But okay, we actually get the chrono time point as it is in the book, as it is a template, so it made it a template. Okay, nice. We also see that we use TM value here, but we don't see any calculations on this. We see that SDRF time is used, which means this is actually a wrapper. And this function should always be correct because SDRF time isn't the C standard, and %v, we'll see about that in a minute. But generally, I already knew through my research through that, and I was kind of surprised to see an AI come up with it just as the first thing, while the other AIs all, chose to do calculations, and then at least for our edge cases were wrong. And yeah, my anticipation that this should be correct and pass all tests which we have at the moment is correct. So let's see what Claude is doing with a correct implementation if we ask it if it's correct. Also, I want to point out that the other AIs, wrote actual code, and this is just a wrapper. So at the beginning, my first reaction was like, okay, it's nice, but is that what I wanted? Is that what I would do? Is it a bit cheating to just call a function that does it? It's a working solution and fine with me, but let's see what happens when we ask Claude if that implementation is correct. Does it just say yes, cool, that's cool, you can use it, or is it doing something else? So we've had a correct solution, just to point this out. And now Claude, of course, agrees with us that obviously we seem to have spotted a potential issue here. And now they claim that their implementation has a flaw when handling ISO week numbers, and that %v would have some couple of problems. The %v format specifier isn't guaranteed to be supported on all platforms. Converting back and forth time between time point and C-style structures loses precision. So the first argument they make here is that %v is not available everywhere. Good. I can give you that, but on the platforms that matters, it should be available, I think. Converting back and forth between time point and C-style time structures loses precision is, I don't know. And then it claims it doesn't handle ISO week date system properly, which has specific rules for determining week numbers. I need to pick Howard Hinnan's brain on that, but I think we have some bold claims here. So I looked up then the percentage V in the standard, and it's there since C++11. So if you use a C++11 compiler today, you should have that support. And here it explains again. This is based on ISO 8601, which we've seen at the start, and then you can expect that this is correct, right? That would be an issue for the standardization if that would not be correct. So these two last statements, I think here, which Claude is doing, is it hallucinated? I've looked into it a little bit, but I couldn't really find an issue. And we are looking for the week, and we have something which is basically a day. So maybe Claude is like pointing at something like leap seconds, or just generally that you might have time zone issues if you don't lose local time, etc. There's some things which you could come up here with to explain this, but it's also kind of properly then some edge case. And then actually, it gives us a new solution, which is this one. And voila, surprisingly, this also passes. So we have now the second correct implementation. And this is basically kind of what the other AIs have done code-wise, but failed, and Claude gets this right. But it then says, wait a minute, that's over-engineered. I'll give you the C++20 solution. Also, it did give us a C++17 solution below that. I didn't test that. I still have to do that. But I was like, okay, C++20 solution, great. That's small, concise. That'd be really nice if that works. No, that fails. So also Claude is not perfect in just giving the correct solutions. But it catches itself and says, here, well, and here we see Matt Godbolt. So thank you for forwarding these prompts and conversations to. And so we get now that they're saying this isn't right for C++20 version. So actually they catch themselves and say that's not right what I provided. And I'm overthinking this. Let me give you a simple, reliable approach that works properly. So again, thank you, Matt, for just being part of the experiment. And this is the version which it outputs, which also passes our tests. So for the moment, we should say it's correct. Thanks, Claude. Thanks, Matt. So this concludes basically the interview part now. But I hear it again and again that performance is an important thing in C++. So maybe we look at the performance. We have 3 solutions. And of course, we could ask Claude which one is the best one, etc. But we've already seen that AIs like to hallucinate, and I'm not really sure if Claude has any opinion on performance and what it generally could answer this question or not. Would be interesting to see. But we didn't do it with the others, and only Claude provided correct implementations, and performance we don't have to care about when the implementation isn't passing the tests, right? So let's look at the 3 implementations that Claude gave us. At least one of them is correct. The other 2 may need a few more tests. And it's something I want to stress, that the wrapper uses something which we kind of assume that is correct. And the other tests, I think that, maybe you should add a few more tests to like week of January, last week of December, and just some random dates. But for the moment, that's our effort, which we have done. So for now, let's just measure and see the performance. And for that, quickbench.com is my go-to solution. Until now, everything has been compiling in Godbolt. And now let's talk about the setup which we have run so far. Godbolt just uses the GCC from last year, 14.2. And that is not available on Quickbench. So Quickbench uses 13.2, and copying over the code and adjusting the code, there was only one thing I needed to add, which is using namespace chronoliterals. And I am not sure if that's like on the compiler or maybe the setup in Compiler Explorer seems to include that somehow. And maybe it's also there somewhere in the code and I didn't copy it over. So that's just, something which caught my attention there, and I thought I'd document it here. And again, we have 3 correct implementations. This is the first Claude solution. It uses the wrapper, and then we have the calculations here. This is the longest, and according to Claude, the over-engineered solution than the last solution which Claude gave us. And this is basically how those Quickbench tests look. I've had to modify the code of the test here a little bit to fit it into the coding window of Quickbench to be able to make a screenshot, though that I can show you the setup. And this is all very easy to test. This is nothing complicated. And we call it again with various dates we test for from our test suite. And now it's time to make your predictions. Which of those implementations do you think is the fastest? Do you think that the wrapper is faster than the other 2 solutions? Or do you think that the last solution provided by Claude is the fastest, or the first solution, which or like the first corrected, the first implementation, which was over-engineered? And if I go back to the solutions, here we see it's like has a few ifs, but these trigger or not. Here we have if blocks, which, if they don't trigger, that probably makes us more performant in this case, potentially. And here we just have a small function which does things. But we don't know like what the local time R cost is. We don't know what SDF time actually has as a runtime cost and what we do as a buffer there. So I guess you made your predictions. And this is the result. Seems we have a winner, and that's the wrapper. And it's not really a competition here. And the last solution by Claude is a little bit faster than the other one. But we are testing corner cases. And I think in this case, we're just pessimizing the corner cases. And if we test it with regular dates, that might have an influence on those 2 solutions, but not on the other one. And so far, I haven't tested that hypothesis. But I've tested, and this is a result generally if you want to see actually the bar from first Claude. I have a screenshot for that in a second. I also wanted to see if there's some ordering in play, and maybe the first solution is the slowest, and the last solution just gets to be the fastest. But no, this keeps. So the wrapper version is 110 times faster than the other 2 solutions. So all solutions are correct. Just one of them is a tiny bit faster. So interesting. And if you had a longer conversation with Claude about the code and everything else, would you still remember the wrapper at the start? Would you look at this code and think that maybe you should use that? Maybe, would you fall for Claude telling you that %v is not potentially available on some systems, etc.? Again, this is the winning solution. And so far it's only the AI. So I was wondering, is this the best one can do? So I've been looking at this solution with the goal to tweak it a bit to see if there's other functions. And I had it look at the local time R function, what it does, and if there's an alternative to it. And I've also been looking at S2E. That's something that came with C++11, and it's also kind of very easy and convincing to find. That's probably why Claude is using it here. But a bit more complicated in usage, but doing the same thing as from chars. And I was curious if that would be better. So I've changed GM time R from local time R and use this because local time in the meantime read up that is basically looking at the time in the system, and it's the system call and potentially costs a bit more. And GM time R is not doing it's more like a general time solution where I wondered, is that faster? Maybe it's not faster, maybe it's even slower, right? We don't know the result yet. And then I wondered from chars, is from chars in this case something which is good to use, or is it slower? And yeah, I fall back to S2E if from chars fails. Also, SDRF time might have a return value, which I haven't checked, which we're not actually interpreting here. That's something else which one might want to address. But anyways, this is the result. So if we use both of these changes, we beat Claude's solution by a factor of 1.6. And I've also did put the solution in the tests, and it passes the tests. One, especially with a GM time R, one should see if that's what you want. Local time R might be the thing you want to really actually be sure that you're converting to a time structure that is in the correct day. Or like, look if you have a Monday or a Sunday where this could happen. And that gives a good speed up. I've also tested from chars without that, and also from chars gives a speed up. I think it was like by 1.2 or 1.4. Not sure which of these is a bigger increase in performance. It's probably the GM time R. So that make it like a speed up from 1.2 with from chars, and then again to 1.6 with GM time. And yeah, we are not running on Windows, so I didn't check the local time S, etc. So quite interesting results. And just generally have in mind that we've been mostly testing corner cases, because that's what you do when you test for correctness. Especially in performance, one should point out that the function in its lifetime will probably not see the percentage of corner cases it sees in the tests. So if we wanted to know how this behaves in a normal program, we would need to have a more well-distributed set of dates to see if it's doing that correctly. But for the wrapper function, that doesn't matter so much. Claude Finals version played around a little bit with that. I didn't get it to be correct and faster. Also didn't spend too much time on it, but I figured out, like, MCAT time sounded like that it's expensive to call. And so I tested that by just kicking the line with MCAT time out, and then yes, the solution is faster. It's also wrong, but that's one of the performance issues with this function. Which brings me to conclusions. Grok was the most confident, even generated tests and showed the results without being asked. And this was like the first thing I tried, right? I was very impressed by that. That's a high bar right away. And the problem was just, that these tests didn't pass. So that made me wonder what compiler did they use, and they admitted, no, I'm not compiling. And they cannot, maybe that's a good thing, right? But so they kind of simulate that, and then they give you the result of that and explain you what that should do. But you have to check for if that is actually mapping out with reality, or if you're just in La La Land with the AI. So ChatGPT did not perform well. Maybe it had a bad day. I don't know. I would need to have some other solutions, some other problems to test the simple thesis. Claude did kind of good. I do want to stress that I'm not sure if it had an edge or it's a more advanced version than what ChatGPT is by default when you use a chat agent on the website of them. Also, maybe it had an edge because it's a session by Matt Godbolt, and Matt had been doing some programming stuff with that. So it got everything right. Nice. But also did some hallucinations, some things where I am not sure. So it's not perfect. And let's not forget that when the correct implementation, it got insecure and gave us a solution which is still correct. Nice. But had actually like kind of a lot of worse performance. And I think a performance penalty of 110 times slower is probably not what you want to deploy to production, right? And generally, you could see that it is then getting insecure. So it's a kind of maybe an interesting question to ask. And I also found it interesting that when I asked, is your implementation correct or incorrect, that all AIs kind of agreed with that, and Claude didn't say that his implementation is correct or something. It just said, "Oh yeah, you're right to point out issues with that, and here are the issues. Are those issues really there?" And I want to mention that there is more advanced options, right? There's I didn't use anything with an MCP. Model context protocol is when an AI basically can invoke other things, which in some ways can include compilers. So a more local model or a code agent, which is specifically built and offered for coding, is then maybe able to compile the code and give you code that compiles. But that wasn't an issue with all of them, right? All the code I got always compiled. There have absolutely been no issues where the code generation was faulty or something like that. And I do assume that those AIs, which you then use through those more advanced coding solutions like Claude Code, they use the same agents and the similar technology. Maybe when you pay, you get a more advanced model, and that model might be able to do more. And speaking of Claude Code, recently Matt Godbolt has been instructing Claude to write about what he's been doing with Claude. He's used it to restructure and modernize his Python-based blog, and that is actually an interesting read. At first, I just scrolled down and read what Matt actually then wrote, but in the meantime, I've read through what also Claude wrote, and it's kind of interesting. And again, thank you to Matt for helping out with Claude. And for the moment, it seems that I kind of have to come up with a different problem for the next interview level to see how Claude and other AIs react to that. Something similar to what I have right now. Maybe not that daytime related, or I don't know. It's an open question. Just if you have ideas, let me know. Part 2, yeah, I've started playing around with that, and I plan to keep playing around with that and talk about it. So I've tried things in the internet with this edition, and maybe I want to try something that is working on my machine. I'm aware that Olama exists, so let's give that a spin. But then we would, have like, I don't know, 200 slides here, and I didn't want to do that. So that's something which I'd be also more comfortable to actually use. I don't know if I just want to have an internet-based AI assistant, which I wouldn't want to share my code base with that, right? But having an AI assistant in the internet which just writes correct code would be nice. But I think the results speak for themselves. And I don't know if like Claude would get all my other problems right? So there's a few things that I came upon about AI, sometimes also about AI and coding, while I prepared the talk in the recent week. So here's a study on freelancing where LLMs were used to try to earn $1 million, and they got to like to 400K for Claude and to kind of 300 or 380 for ChatGPT. And that's an interesting study, and there's on a more explained thing of that on LinkedIn. Then yesterday I saw Jason Turner posting about asking Claude or comparing Claude versus ChatGPT when asked to, program C++ in the style of Jason Turner. And the first link goes to Claude, the second link goes to ChatGPT. And he says like they're getting better. They know some good facts, and apparently ChatGPT comes up with some favorite sayings of his. And from his experience, Claude is better at applying constant expression, and GPT is a bit out of date for C++ 20 and beyond implementation info, which does make sense depending on the model you use. It might not be aware about the newest stuff in the standard, right? And I think we kind of see that here, that every model falls back for the calculation on C functions and C stuff. Chrono was handed into the function, but then not really. We didn't ever get a solution based on Chrono that was correct. And I've looked into the ChatGPT. The Claude is just the output of the code, but ChatGPT actually gave some examples here, and I thought, why not include it here at the end of the talk? So as an example, it now shows a filter even for numbers, and then also a C++ 20 version, which uses ranges. And Jason Turner then goes ahead and asks it, why didn't you use constant expression? And I didn't test those outputs either. So, and again, we see when you ask the AI, it agrees with you and says, hey, great catch. And, then explains that vector and copy if aren't constant expression friendly until C++ 2023. And so it provides now a function with std array, which I find interesting. This is, of course, you can do that, but this function now a bit has a problem that it will not be usable at runtime. It just, generally gives you this usage example, and then you can call it and see if it's correct or not. But so Jason didn't ask to have this problem solved. Jason just asked it to, talk about Jason Turner style, and that's what it used as an example. And just, thanks for the insight, Jason. Thanks for sharing. And today I saw this. I still have to look at that, but I think he has a point there. There's a lot of snake oil, and AI is partly part of that. So not every problem can be used by artificial intelligence, and that's just a talk by an MIT professor. We'll just have to see, but the stuff is all on the spectrum, like yay and nay. And just have in mind that AI is just a parrot sometimes, and this has also been, like, this week popular on Mastodon and probably some other social platforms, that if you make up a weird saying and add meaning, Google will explain that meaning to you, like you can't lick a badger twice. Or somebody else says to grow an avocado, you have to slap the squirrel. And AI is always happy to output text about everything. So when when you use AI, so I think a big learning point which I've seen throughout this is you should better be knowing what you do. If you generate code, you need to be able to validate that code and to be sure that it's doing what it's doing. And as we saw with Grok, but also with Claude, that it can be very convincing, and that might not lead to your best results. So generally, thanks for listening. That's it for the moment. I will be putting those links in a moment in the chat if you want to have a look at it, but let's first have some questions. I guess you have questions, right? Well, I have been muted all the time, probably. So yeah, I didn't see the chat in Hobilo, but there's a lot of links and other things about this. And yeah, if you have generally questions on Hobilo, ask them in the Q&A tab. That's easier for me. And let's see the questions from LinkedIn. So yes, I'll share the questions and the links in a minute. Yeah, the video will be later on YouTube. So no, you can't download the video, but this will be on YouTube and on LinkedIn. I hope it doesn't cut me short like the last time for 30 minutes only. So maybe on LinkedIn, when you go later to this, you only can see the last 30 minutes. Maybe that's a new thing that they do, but generally the video is recorded and will be later on YouTube, probably tomorrow. Do I plan to use AI again? That's a good question. Yes, as I mentioned, I want to have a look at the more coding optimized agents in Olama, and also I see the Qt company advertising their plugin for Qt Creator and mentioning some code models they've used for testing, and they have their own benchmark for QML programming. And I want to generally play around with this a bit. QML I don't know really well, and using AI to generate QML would be an interesting task to then also learn about QML and checking if it's doing something which it should or not. So definitely, I will be checking more about this, and I guess this video will give a ton of feedback and comments and pointers. So I'll be playing around with it, and I think like the main thing I've learned so far is, especially like as a someone who is in the community, that it's a very important communication point for us as programmers, that AI is only usable when you know what you're doing, and that people, they still need to be educated. And one concern I've heard from some people, especially that like the newer folks, the junior folks now might fall for doing everything with AI and miss out on the learning opportunity, and hence not reach the level of senior which we have through web search, which I'm not sure. I mean, web search is always there, and the good people will use it, also in the younger generation. So I think that AI is interesting, but also still very limited. So are you aware of a way to feed large amounts of code to an AI assistant? Like, I want to give the Chrome sources and then ask questions about it. No, I am not aware about that. And I know that the context window of AIs is fairly limited. And what's it? AI IDE? I don't get the name right now. I don't use it. Cursor. And I've seen some people say that when their projects get into like a certain size, which I think is even like below 100K lines, that Cursor gets into problems with running things. And generally, there's like probably the local AI assistants. You could just point at some files, and I don't know how that works. But that's something which is an open question. And yeah, so there's a question about LLMs integrated in IDEs, for instance, C-Line. I do not use C-Line, so I know that JetBrains has been vocal about their new AI support, but generally, we are right now in the hype cycle, and everyone is talking about AI. The Qt company is writing about it, and only in the small print you can read that their code assistant, which they offer for Qt Creator, is only available if you have the commercial Qt license, and that it's not available. But there's an open source variant, which basically does the same thing for Qt Creator, and I might try that out. But for the moment, no, I haven't gone through the hassle of connecting an IDE with some sort of either locally running agent or with something like Copilot or Claude. So there's a question from LinkedIn. Omar asks, what problems in the past could you not solve with AI? It's not about that. I don't have problems which I can't solve without AI. I stumbled about the weak number, and I found it interesting to generally ask an AI to solve this problem, because it's a very encapsulated problem, and a problem that isn't trivial to solve, because it has corner cases which it can get wrong. And so I thought that is potentially a great way to see if AI is actually knowing what it's doing, or if it's just hallucinating and saying that its solutions are correct because I've asked it if it's correct. And if you ask if it's correct, then of course the AI has an incentive to tell you that it's correct. And so yeah, for your problems, trying to solve things with weights and SQL combining, a lot of stuff, which, yeah, I don't know about that. But thanks for asking. Let me look again if we have more questions. And we do have another question from Hobilo. Is AI currently more accurate at generating code or explaining it? That's something I didn't look at. All right. So ChatGPT commented nearly every line of its solution, which was wrong, but at least that lets you know why it did that. And I think that's something which you also can ask the AI to do, to please comment every code line and tell me why you're doing it, which I think would be really helpful if you use AI-generated code, that just you see what it's telling you there. But then again, you have the problem that maybe it's just made up. Maybe it's just, saying here, this is the line where I invent the unicorns. And so it's kind of difficult to say right now. And I don't have the experience to say that right now. I don't use AI in my everyday development. It's just for me that I started exploring this, and I would say I'm a beginner in that. Okay. And I'm trying to get to the next question. Did you try to use AI to generate the documentation on top of unknown code? No. I think that is a use case, but I usually mostly deal with code that I've written. So maybe it's a great thing to explain what I've done in the past. But for now, I think that that's not a use case I have so much. I'd rather have the use case that I say, well, this is a function which I could just generate with AI, and then I can test it. And that's probably how people use it in their everyday use cases. Of course, yeah, there's many other use cases what you can do with AI, and I didn't test for them all. But that's another thing which I would like to have to see, that a coding assistant should be able to explain your code. But that's a bit also kind of the question how you see a coding assistant. What should it solve for you? And then there's a question: would anyone disagree that AI is at least good enough to be a useful accelerator for coding? I am not sure about that. Okay. I think in some areas, and I've seen people talk about this, AI can be a great code generator for scaffolding, for CMake, etc. I've seen people talk about this. I've not tried it myself, but definitely might have its use cases. Are the consequences of burning the planet for it worth it? I don't know. And right now we do have the situation that all those companies try to either get funding to do something with AI, and then or have something which is like a code assistant or something with AI, and they try to sell you that. So I'm not sure about that. Generally, as I said, I'm more skeptical, and I think that everyone has that right to be skeptical and to actually look, is it up to the tasks, which we do. And the reason why I came up with the weak number is I have, related to the CSV work I did last year, I'm thinking about getting statistical reports out of that. And I figured out that getting those statistics on the month is too big in a granularity. I would like to see the week. And then a weak number was a bias. And that's why I started researching this. And then it came to my mind that actually this is a good problem to try to solve with AI. It's not very complex. It doesn't have to understand anything from my code, but it's not so trivial that it can just solve it. But yeah. All right. I think generally I will close the talk. So thank you for coming. It seems there are no more questions. Then I'll close the chat and the stream. Thank you for coming. See you next week on Thursday on 5 p.m. for the interview on the Modern CMake for C++ book. And until then, thank you for listening.